A little bit of background on virtue ethics. It is a moral theory that focuses on the development of virtuous character. So here, we emphasize on the character formation of the individual. No? So hence, virtue ethics is not simply a set of principles or a set of rules that we need to follow or adhere. No? It involves a lifelong process, no? From birth to death, from the womb to the tomb. No? So it's not just a one-stop shop, ethical formula, no, on how to live a virtuous life or a good life. So virtue ethics is saying that we need to develop constantly, practice, no, in order to become a virtuous person. So here, education plays a very important role. Education, training, family, environment, no, these are very crucial uh, in virtue ethics. Okay. So virtues are ingrained dispositions to act by standards of excellence. So later on we will define, no? Elaborate more on what we mean by virtues. Okay. In virtue ethics, character is the key to the moral life. So again, as I've said, it's character formation is essential. For it is from a virtuous character that moral conduct and values naturally arise. So when a person is virtuous, you know, goodness will simply come out from him or her. No? In other words, uh, doing good will become his second nature, so to speak. No? If a person is virtuous, therefore he is good at doing good. No? Excellence, that is what we mean by excellence. No? You are good at doing something. Okay, so that's the goal of virtue ethics. No? We develop virtues in life, so that we can practice them, no? And then of course, so that values or virtues can naturally, no, uh, come out, no, from our actions. So virtues or virtue ethics has its origin from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle. No? So it gradually developed, although it was really Aristotle who formulated what we call virtue ethics. Aristotle believed that education plays an important role in the development of the moral agent. Training. No? So when you say education, it involves formal education, school, what we learn in school, and of course family, no? Upbringing, parents, no? Elders, relatives. These are important factors, in developing virtuous life. So virtue ethics would start with education, with uh, formal training. No? First, inside the house, in the family, and then later on, when you go to school, you will also learn uh, virtues there, how to act, no, in relation to a virtuous life. So the question is, how can education form the human person to become good individuals? Okay, it is presupposed that the more one knows, the better he or she is able to do that which is right. So knowledge and ethics or morals are connected. No? Okay. Knowledge of the good will eventually lead one to do the good. Okay. So morality is bound up with knowledge. Knowledge of the good must therefore be taught. It should be learned. No? So once you know the good, you do the good. This is the assumption, no, of Aristotle. For Socrates and Plato, ethics, which is a practical science, no, that deals with the morality of human acts, is an important element in moral education. Ethical growth and maturity as a continuous process of development requires constant practice. So it's not enough that you know the good. You also have to do the good. No? Okay? So knowledge and praxis, no? Theory and praxis, these are always connected. No? Hindi pwedeng buwagon. Okay? Because there are, of course, later on, may mga critic po daan, no? Because there are people who know, who are brilliant, okay? And yet they are doing bad things. So it doesn't mean that Aristotle is wrong in formulating his virtue ethics. Okay? Socrates has an answer to that. Later on, we will discuss that. Socrates clearly pointed out that he who knows the good does the good. So, good, correct thinking. No, correct thinking will lead to correct action. No? So, which means that the activity of knowing would inevitably lead to the practical activity of doing. So, it should bridge the gap. Virtue ethics should bridge the gap between knowing and doing. The more one knows, the more one does the good. In other words, the more one knows, the better is he to do that which is right. Okay, so here it's important to note no, that those people who do bad things, according to Socrates, are either ignorant or don't know at all. So duha ra gyud ang padulngan na no. If you do bad things, either you are ignorant, that means you lack knowledge, no? Ignorant, no? Lack knowledge, or you don't know at all. Okay, so of course there are loopholes also no, in this kind of argument. As I mentioned already, uh, many of our politicians, for example, are graduates of uh, Catholic universities, no? Elite universities, and these same politicians who are graduates of elite universities, Catholic universities, are also corrupt politicians. No? So, di man tamo kaingon nga ignorant sila kay from preschool up to high school up to college, Catholic school sila, nag-eskwela, no? So they are well equipped with Catholic teachings, no? Ethics, morality, and yet when they become politicians or leaders in the government, they practice, for example, mga corrupt practices. No? So how do we reconcile this view of Socrates to the reality of Philippine politics? Okay, so either you are ignorant or you don't know anything at all. So how do you dispel ignorance? How do you get rid of ignorance? Simple lang, according to Socrates. No? Education pa rin. Education. So you should learn, you should discover, explore, no? Use all means in order to know no? The implications of your actions. Okay? So moral education therefore refers to how a person both thinks and behaves. To be judged as a moral person, I must not only be capable of rendering sound moral judgments, but I must also act in particular moral ways. So the critical relationship between ethics and education lies in the question, what ought I do with what I know? So, unsa may akong buhaton? Kabalo ko unsay maayo, unsay good. I have the knowledge. So what will I do with this knowledge? Okay. So thus there is a hermeneutical cycle between knowledge, moral commitment, and action. So dili gid buwag. Virtue ethics is telling us that knowledge, commitment, and action should be integrated. Kining tulo. No? These are three important elements of uh, virtue ethics. No? Education, knowledge, moral commitment, the will to do the good, and action. No? Okay. This refers to the action. Another very important thing that we need to discuss here is eudaimonia. The first sentence of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, this is his book, no? Nicomachean Ethics.